BBC Radio Northampton. Tim Wheeler. BBC Radio Northampton.
Now, new changes to the highway code will give pedestrians greater priority over cars at junctions and crossing. Under the current code, motorists only have to give way when pedestrians step onto a crossing. The new code will also mean that cyclists have priority when travelling straight ahead at junctions. This is a new hierarchy of road users, and in a way it puts more responsibility for road safety on the more dangerous modes of transport. So if you can do more harm, a car, a van, a lorry, a motorbike, you'll have to stay back and make way, rather than expecting, cyclists and pedestrians to take care to get out of your way. Well, Tom Jones is a blogger from Wellingborough who writes about he and his family's cycling adventures. In fact, a video he uploaded online of his 6-year-old daughter giving a thumbs up to a lorry driver giving space whilst overtaking. It went viral. It went everywhere. And Tom and his family found themselves the toast of news channels and celebrities around the world. He also took part in the consultation for this new approach to the highway code, and he's with us now. Hey, Tom, thanks for being there.
Good afternoon, Tim. Thank you for having me on what I'm going to dub the Ride Time Show for the next couple of minutes.
Oh, I like it, the Ride Time Show. Well, you're speaking to a very keen, not very good, but very keen cyclist. So you're in good company. Now, listen, we're going to talk about this plan, but let's talk about being a cyclist in the county. Are the roads currently sometimes an excessively dangerous place to be?
It's an upsetting and it's a dispiriting place to be a lot of the time. Our county is a beautiful place. My son's out having a bike ride this afternoon, in spite of the weather, and we can all enjoy a good climb up Bell End if we visit Wollaston. But the reality is, it's a nasty little climb that, and motorists don't give you the space that they should. And when it comes to infrastructure, we are lagging sorely behind, never mind other countries, but even other parts of Britain.
It's, infrastructure, I guess, is one thing to talk about, because cycle lanes are one way that I suppose big cities like London have led the way nationally in terms of giving people a safe space to cycle in a cycle lane. But even that network, if anyone who's cycled down there will know that it's incomplete and it's bitty and it's sometimes confusing and it's not always perfect. Are cycle lanes one of the major answers to making this a better county for cyclists, would you say?
Absolutely, and especially for the take-up of women and children and the elderly riding their bikes. It's absolutely crucial that we've got the right infrastructure for a given mode of transport, and segregated, safe infrastructure is absolutely key to that. I mean, it's ironic, really, that we've had this good news from the government today, and yet the Northamptonshire councils are busy removing things. We've seen the scheme that was put in Rushmere Road in Northampton last year has been ripped out. Most of the emergency active travel fund schemes that were delivered in this county have already been removed without properly assessing how they worked. And that's really, really saddening. In Wellingborough here, we've spent £5 million on a car park during the pandemic. And the few barriers that we put out to give people more space to walk around the town centre have been unceremoniously dumped.
I've got lots to ask you, but I'm just going to delve deeper into this point because cycle lanes fascinate me. I've just been sat here imagining what Northampton town centre and beyond would look like if it had a greater provision of cycle lanes. And then I was thinking about how long it would take to put them in and how much it might cost, and how, it's a historic part of the world, Northamptonshire, some very old towns. The roads can be quite slim, quite narrow. Would it be an incredibly expensive project to put more cycle lanes into the county, and a project that would just take ages, giving disruption to thousands of people?
Well, George Harrison was singing about it on the show a minute ago. It's going to take patience, it's going to take time, it's going to take money to do it right. But, £338 million the government has committed today. That sounds a lot of money until you realise that the road building fund during that period is £27 billion. And so a lot of this is down to priorities, but it's also a case of, deciding what we want to cherish. The town centre in Wellingborough has through traffic carving straight through the middle of it. And if you want to sit outside the Hind or, the historic buildings around the middle of the town and have something to eat, you do it to a cacophony of traffic and 40-ton trucks going through, many of which are not actually accessing the town centre, but Google Maps has told them it's a couple of minutes quicker than the ring road. So I think a lot of it is just down to prioritisation. It's down to saying, what do we cherish? What do we think is important about our town centres? And for me, it's about them being a place where people can mingle and mix and be, and can get around at a human level and actually want to spend time there. Lots of people decry the state of our town centres, and that they wouldn't want to go there and spend any time. Well, what are we prepared to do to change that? Actually, a good deal of it is more down to will, I think, than spending lots of money.
Well, let's move on to the highway code and these changes, which really caught my attention. Some really fascinating points in here. You were approached about this legislation, and I wonder what you said, what you were asked, and what your responses were.
Well, I think the most important thing that comes out in what's arrived today is the hierarchy of road users. And this is something that actually exists in most of our neighbouring countries, and we've been a bit slow to cotton on to. But the best way I can describe it really is, if you imagine you've got a melon and a grape. If you drop the grape onto the melon from a foot above it, that does a certain amount of damage. If you then reverse it around and drop the melon onto the grape, then you get a slightly different outcome. And until now, our highway code has basically said that children walking to school and lorry drivers bear the same degree of responsibility towards one another in terms of road safety, rather than following the idea of who can do the most damage. And the heartening thing about the consultation was that 79% of respondents supported the principle of a hierarchy of road users. And so it starts with pedestrians, and let's face it, we're all pedestrians at some point or other in a day, even if we're only walking to our car. So we're placing human life at the centre of it, and we're saying that the responsibility for what happens on the roads has to be proportional to the degree of damage that the mode of transport you've chosen represents to others.
So where are the crunch points going to be? Let's talk about this in practical terms. Are we talking about the pedestrian crossings where you might have a Belisha beacon? Are we talking about the zebra crossing, those kind of things? Describe how this legislation would change the experience of someone about to use one of those crossings that isn't button activated.
So a lot of people don't actually realise this, and it came out in the consultation that many people thought this was already the case. But you don't actually have priority at a zebra crossing until you've actually put your foot in the road. An approaching motorist or cyclist or 40-ton truck is only obliged to pull up for you if you've actually put your foot out in the road first. So one of the changes that comes is that if you stand at a zebra crossing, you automatically have priority for crossing the road, and people have to give way to you. So 98% of people responded in favour of that in the consultation. But it goes further than that. And it also therefore means that road users need to give way to pedestrians who are crossing the road at a junction, for example. Again, which, if you've been on holiday, a lot of people on the continent are familiar with the idea that they can step out into the road at a junction and expect people to stop for them. So it goes right the way up the hierarchy. Can you
talk through that again? Sorry, I'm just sat here and my brain's trying to picture it, and I'm trying to work out what happens when I'm in Spain and what happens here. What kind of a junction are you talking about?
So if at a T-junction you're turning into another road, you've got to give way, and the highway code already says that you should give way to people who are already in the road. But it goes further than that now. So if you are turning into a T-junction and there are pedestrians using the pavement that want to go straight on alongside you, you need to give way to them. So the obvious one to think of is if you're turning into a junction on your left and someone is walking up the pavement in the same direction that you're driving, if they're crossing the street and carrying on, you need to give way to allow them to do that. And likewise for a cyclist.
This is interesting.
It's all about check your near side mirror in that instance. And it is as simple as that.
It is, but I've got to confess, look, I'm a reasonable person, I'm a patient person, I'm a cyclist, I'm a walker, and I'm a driver, and I get really wound up when I'm about to turn left at a junction and someone walks out across the road and I have to pause. In my mind, that's my right of way. I'm the one that could kill them. They're the person that should stop and wait, and half the time they've got their mobile phone out or they're not paying attention. And that drives me absolutely insane. But this legislation will mean that I am now in the wrong. Regardless of whether they're looking or not, if they've got their iPod in, whatever it is they're doing, I have to wait.
I think one of the most valuable things that we can do as we look at this, because I think driving in particular changes all of us subtly from a psychological perspective. I think one of the things that we have to sort of take a step back from is what our rights are in the given situation, and this idea of right of way. It's a phrase that we often use in circumstances where it doesn't actually have any legal meaning, but this idea, and you touched on it, that we all pose some form of risk to others in the choices that we take about how we get around. And so the moment we decide to use a mode of transport that's capable of killing somebody else, it's incumbent on us to think about that. And I think a lot of this, and when Rhoda, my daughter, went viral in the first instance, waving at this lorry driver who'd only done what the highway code says, but because it's such a rarity to see it done so beautifully, she had her thumb in the air and was, thank you. The thing that actually touched people about that was the humanity of it, because it was seen from the eyes of a 4-year-old little girl.
I get that, and I say again, I'm a patient, respectful person, and if I was walking on the pavement and I see a car turning left and I stop before crossing the road, I'm doing it because in my mind, even though I'm a pedestrian and even though I'm a cyclist at times, in my mind that car is on a road going left onto another road, and I as a pedestrian, I'm waiting for the car to make progress round that corner and then I'll safely cross. That's the way I was told to do it as a child. It's the way I've always done it since. And in my mind, that's a respectful thing to the motorist to allow them to make their journey round the corner and then I walk across the road. And this is a fundamental shifting in that. And I'm not saying I'm not on the side of this legislation, and I really want the world to be a better place for pedestrians and cyclists because cars are bad news effectively in many respects. I do find this quite bizarre.
I think it was really interesting. A quote from the Prime Minister earlier with this was, he said, traffic is not a force of nature, it's a product of people's choices. And if you make it easier and safer for people to make those choices, they'll do it. And as you rightly say, ultimately, we've got to do something about cars. Car ownership in this country has grown exponentially, and our town centres do have those narrow roads, and they can't physically grow to accommodate that. And so some of this, I think, has to unapologetically be about saying the roads are a finite resource, and we have to look at how we use them, and we have to use them with a degree of humanity. And there's a principle in the Netherlands, actually. You'll see signs around the streets in towns saying that cars are guests in town centres and in places where people live. I think that would be a wonderful philosophy for us to sort of embrace, to think that we don't have to live in amongst cars all the time. They have their place. I have a car. I drive it. Freely admit that that's necessary, especially in a county where we lost a lot of our railways and where public transport is far from ideal.
Yeah.
But in our town centres and in the places where people live and where children go to school, the idea that someone who's chosen to go by car is a guest, to me, actually, it's a way of bringing the humanity into how we view it. And certainly, for as long as we don't have the segregation, it comes back to the whole infrastructure thing, where infrastructure is segregated and done properly, actually, some of these conflicts don't exist in the first place. And so it's a failure of our highways that we have to do it. But I think the really welcome thing about today's announcement about the changes to the highway code is that in places where we don't yet have that ideal infrastructure, which we must invest in the near future. And as I say, it's a great shame that we've got a government that's desperate to put this stuff in and providing money to do it, and a council that's stripping it out at the same time. I think it's useful that we have a framework that brings a bit of humanity back into the roads while we're using them in their current imperfect state. Well,
we will obviously invite the relevant authorities to come on the programme and listen to what you've had to say and give their account of what we should do moving forwards in the county. I think we'll leave it there, but that is really interesting. I thank you very much for your time. And of course, I mean, one day if we have automated electric vehicles, then the accidents could be completely a thing of the past. But who can say?
And if you fancy a bike, if you fancy a bike ride tonight, it's the Critical Mass bike rides that take place all around the county. We'll be there, out there, even if it's raining. We'll be there in Wellingborough tonight.
Yes.
6 outside behind.
Good stuff. Tom, thank you. Really interesting. Thank you for your time.
Great pleasure, Tim. Take care.
Cheers. Tom Jones there. All right, let's get some half-past headlines with Martin Heath.
Official estimates suggest the number of people infected with coronavirus has